on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
Our next guest is based right here in Houston. He's been in the market for a long time. He now does national radio on Sirius XM Mad Dog Sports Radio. He is Mike Meltser, and he joins us now on our progressive guest line. Good afternoon, Michael.
Good afternoon, Jake. How are you?
I'm hanging in, man. So I wanted to get to some of the comments that I heard you recently make in another interview spot. You said the Texans are the worst situation in professional sports right now. Explain.
Well, listen, I can't pretend like I know every NHL situation well. I guess the folks of the Buffalo Sabres are not happy. But, like, when you think about the possibility that the Texans might have to trade a 25-year-old superstar franchise quarterback, which has literally never happened in NFL history, I just don't know what franchise is in a worse situation. Even, like, the teams that are worse in other leagues ostensibly have more hope than they do, because along with this probably necessary trade, the Texans don't really have many picks of their own. And it just kind of leads to the question of, like, hey, if this guy doesn't want to stay in Houston, well, who the hell else is going to want to play football in this city moving forward?
Mike Meltser with us here. Mike, if you were Nick Caserio, what would you do with Deshaun Watson?
What I would do now is nothing, because I have no incentive to do anything before the NFL draft. What I would do is I would be scouring the overall quarterback market. And what I mean is, if I'm Nick Caserio, I would be doing detailed game film analysis on some of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL. I'd be doing the same thing with the guys in the 2021 draft. I'd even be doing it with the guys in the 2022 draft because of this, Jake. If and when a Deshaun Watson trade becomes inevitable, what's critical in that trade is that whatever you get back either provides you with a young quarterback or a very clear path to get a young quarterback. So that's what I'd be doing right now if I was Nick Caserio.
Do you think when Nick Caserio took this job, Mike, he realized how bad it was between Watson and the organization?
I don't think so. I think the guy that we saw at the press conference about 2 months ago, the way he talked about Deshaun Watson and how challenging he was to play in New England, I think he kind of felt like, yeah, Deshaun's not really happy. There have been some rumors about that he wants to go to Miami, but, like, I can work out this situation. But I think once things got worse and he requested a trade and everything that's gone on in those intervening 6 to 8 weeks, I think he has to be fully real. Now he's fully realizing what a terrible situation that he has stepped into. But no, I don't think when he took the job that he realized it was quite this bad.
I agree with you. So I wonder if he could maybe, use that to his advantage in a sense. Like, he could go to Cal McNair, the owner of the team, and say, look, I didn't realize it was this bad. The best path forward is to trade Deshaun. His value will never be higher, and then maybe be able to sell ownership on this rebuild plan, as you pointed out, a trade that would get them a ton of draft picks where they could trade down and get even more picks, or at least kind of restart the franchise because they have no picks and they don't have a whole lot of salary cap space.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Nick could do that. Like, I get the feeling in talking to some people that, like, this is a trade that Cal McNair, like, does not want to make because of what it would represent about the franchise. Whereas Nick Caserio, based on his role and his job, has to be a little bit more pragmatic. I did find it interesting that Albert Breer wrote in Sports Illustrated this week, and he's a guy who's known Caserio, I think, for a while, that Nick is the kind of guy who, like, he's going to do things quietly. He's going to, like, do nothing. And then if and when he decides, hey, the Watson trade needs to happen, he's going to create, like, a very quick bidding war. He'll pick the best package and he'll just execute the trade. I don't know if that quite made sense to me, because I don't know, that just seemed a little odd to me to execute it in that way. But the way you describe it, like, yeah, I guess if Caserio didn't know how bad it was, he could go to Cal and say, well, Watson's value is going to be higher now than it will be in the future. If we're going to do this, we should do it now. I will point out, Jake, I fully agree with something Mike Tannenbaum said this week on ESPN, and he's been saying this for about 10 days, that the Texans have this choice. Either they trade Watson by the first day of the draft, or they need to make an organizational commitment that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how ugly it gets in the media, if they don't trade Watson by the draft, then they will not trade him before the calendar flips to 2022. And they have to be committed to doing that.
Do you think they would have the intestinal fortitude to actually do that, though? That would be my biggest concern, because I could argue, you know what, don't trade him, have the first pick in the draft next year, and then trade him and start your rebuild. But I don't trust the Texans to do the right thing, given their history over the last calendar year. Where are you at with that thought process?
Yeah, I would say it's much more likely than not that they had, as you mentioned, the intestinal fortitude to do it. I would give it at like a 10 to 15% chance, and they would have to be super committed to that strategy and just stick with it over the course of the season and really make it painful for Watson to go through this next year. So I think it's unlikely ultimately, just because if you pursue that course of action, it means, and I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it means that you are picking this battle with Watson over the functioning of your football team. Because if Deshaun Watson is holding out, not over money, but over like organizational differences, and you're trying to play football games, it will be impossible for them to function as a normal football team with that as a distraction every single day. So if they go that route, they need to be fully committed, because they are picking that battle over the functioning of their team on a day in, day out basis.
Mike Meltser, host on Mad Dog Sports Radio on Sirius XM, joining us here on our progressive guest line. This is the Jake Asman Show here on Sports Map Radio. Mike, I've seen you on Twitter be very active in saying that the Jets would be smart in trading Sam Darnold and taking a quarterback second overall, assuming they can't trade for Deshaun Watson. Why do you think the right course of action for the Jets is to do exactly that? Trade Darnold and either draft the quarterback at 2 or put together a package for Deshaun Watson?
I just think, Jake, that there are too many people who operate with this belief of like, hey, we're going to build up a roster, build up a football team, and then we'll go and get our quarterback. I think that is a lot easier said than done. I know Kansas City was able to do it, but they had Alex Smith, who was a pretty good quarterback. And you look at some of these teams that have been very well built the last couple of years. I'll go to, Indianapolis. I think is a really good team. Regardless of what you think of the Wentz trade, like, it's more likely than not, Jake, that trade doesn't work out, because Carson Wentz was like the worst quarterback in the NFL this past season. And while I think he still has elite physical ability, based on this past season, it's more likely than not the trade doesn't work out. So you take a team with a really good GM, a good coach, and they're going to be ruined because it's really hard to upgrade a quarterback. Miami might be in the same spot if they are unable to trade for Deshaun and if Tua doesn't work out. They've done all these great things, rebuilt their franchise, good head coach, like all these good players. Denver, same thing. I look at the Denver Broncos, skill position guys, better offensive line, very good defense. I think they should be on Russell Wilson's list, but they're picking number 9 right now. They've got Drew Lock. That's a team with a star quarterback I believe could win the Super Bowl. But when you're picking at number 9, when you're in these situations, like, it is not easy to land your quarterback. Washington at number 20 has done a good job in the last year of rebuilding their team. And I say all of that to say the Jets are going to get better. I mean, they went from Adam Gase to Robert Saleh. I know Saleh is completely unproven, but I think odds are he's a better coach than Adam Gase, not saying much. So they're going to win more games. And it's going to be harder for them to add a quarterback next year or the year after than it is right now. Think about it this way. And this is what I said to somebody else earlier in the week. The Jets were 2-14 this year. Sam Darnold started 12 of those games. We are going to have at least 4, maybe 5 quarterbacks picked in the first round of this draft. Imagine if none of the teams selecting quarterbacks were the Jets after what they just went through this season. Like, when you say that out loud, that just sounds preposterous unless they're convinced that Sam Darnold is going to be a star.
And that's the biggest thing, Mike, your last point there. You could stick with Sam if you are dead set in your belief that he's going to be a top 10 quarterback someday. And that someday better be coming soon, because he's going into year 4 and you got to pay him soon. But I find it hard to believe that Joe Douglas, who's been with Sam Darnold now for the last 2 years, is going to think Sam is light years better than these quarterbacks coming out. So that'd be the only way you could keep him and justify trading down. But the more likely scenario is if Sam's around even with the talent level, then the tiebreaker would be to the rookie quarterback because he's on a rookie contract.
Yeah, and a lot of people, Jake, have pointed out, well, if you take a quarterback at number 2, that means you're passing on Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase and Parsons, all these guys. That's very fair. Like, you're passing on guys, especially a guy like Chase, who seems like he's going to be a lock to be like a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro for a long time. I get it. It's a cost. But there is a value in taking a quarterback, which is the Jets have a lot of cap space right now. They'll spend a bunch of it in the next couple of weeks. But if they get a quarterback on a rookie deal, they're going to have cap space to surround that player for the next 2, 3, 4 years. And the other thing is, because of the Seattle Jamal Adams trade, it's not like the Jets, if they take Zach Wilson, we're like, okay, they're rolling with this guy and they're going to plug Zach Wilson into Sam Darnold situation. No, they're going to add free agents. They're going to have another first-round pick. They're going to have a high second-round pick. They'll have a third-round pick. And they're going to have other ways to add starters around that rookie quarterback, assuming they take one at number 2.
Mike Meltser, host on Mad Dog Sports Radio, with us here. So staying with the Deshaun Watson conversation as it relates to the Jets, they have the second overall pick. They have 19 total draft picks over the next 2 years, 4 ones over the next 2 years. I mean, most Jet fans listening, Mike, know about the draft capital the Jets have, but how much is too much in trying to acquire Deshaun Watson? If it took 3 ones and Quinnen Williams or 4 ones and Quinnen Williams, I mean, is there a limit that you would, not be comfortable going to if you're Joe Douglas trying to make a deal for Deshaun Watson?
I think if they honestly, Jake, I think if the Jets traded 4 first-round picks, like the 2 this year, the 2 next year, maybe even like a second-round pick in 2023, I actually think that would be reasonable, because, like, ultimately, this is the kind of player the Jets have been searching for like 40 years since Joe Namath stepped away, since he left the franchise. And I know it would be giving up a lot. And unlike my Wilson hypothetical, they wouldn't be able to use those extra picks to build around Watson, but they still have a lot of cap space. They still have some of their picks left. And Watson, unlike Wilson, unlike Fields, is a sure thing. Like, he's like 98%. The only 2 is like injury, basically. Whereas the other guys might be like 60% to hit, or 65 or 50 or something like that. And it's really a 10 to 12 year decision. You have Deshaun Watson. You don't have to win right away. You build around him over the course of these next, 3 years, 5 years. Theoretically, you have him for the long term. So you ask me how much is too much? I'd say, like, if you're giving up like all 5 first-round picks and Quinnen Williams, that's where it would probably, scare me a little bit. But I still think the tie would go to Deshaun. And I just think that, like, because no other team could offer that, I think Joe Douglas would probably be able to negotiate it down from that kind of price tag.
I agree. And I think, if you look at the Jets, as long as, Douglas is aware of who else is in on Watson, he's not going to bid against himself. And that second overall pick that the Jets offer is still the best thing the Texans could get for Deshaun, assuming Jacksonville is not going to shock us all and offer the first pick up in a trade.
Yeah. And I also think one thing that has not been discussed enough about this is, because of the real possibility that Watson ends up in Miami, that's something the Jets have to consider. And Joe Douglas needs to really make sure to monitor the trade market, because while I know the best way to build a team is to kind of have blinders on and do the best thing for your franchise, if you're the Jets, the possibility of, hey, Miami with their picks and Tua being able to trade for Watson, well, what happens if I've got to be facing Deshaun Watson and Josh Allen 4 times a year for the next 10 years? That's also something that Joe Douglas and the Jets need to consider when they think about the Watson trade sweepstakes.
Mike Meltser, Sirius XM, Mad Dog Sports Radio host, with us here. All right, Mike, final question. In 30 seconds or less, who is the Texans starting quarterback week 1 of the 2021 season?
Who is the starting quarterback? I'm going to have a hard time picking up a name, because I guess it'll be, I'll say Jacoby Brissett. I'll pick somebody who's a free agent, who's a veteran, who has started games they can use as like a bridge placeholder.
And Watson's getting traded, you think, by the draft?
I think he will be traded at some point in the offseason. Yes. I'm not 100% sure by the draft, because I don't know if I don't trust what they're doing, to say the least.
Exactly how I feel. Mike Meltser has been our guest. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Meltser. You can listen to him on Sirius XM's Mad Dog Radio. He's based here in Houston, really plugged in with the Texans. Mike, can't thank you enough for your time. Appreciate you hopping on, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jake.
Mike Meltser with us there on our Progressive Guest Line. Quick break, and we're back. Jake Asman with you here on a Saturday on Sports Map Radio.
The Athletic is delivering every